So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in this second webinar of this Human Rights Due Diligence series. As many of you already know, the first one was focused on the general topics or cross-cutting issues of human rights due diligence, and we saw some tools, some practical examples. And now to go deeper into some specific topics, we are starting now with gender equity. We are very happy to have a very interesting panelist today with us that we will go through in the agenda today. But just as a reminder, some instructions for the webinars and how they're usually carried out in the World Banana Forum. This meeting is being recorded and we will be publishing the recording in the FAO YouTube channel, and we will be also publishing a report in English and in Spanish for participants that were not able to join us today to see it later on. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to add them in the Q&A box we have down in the screen. And our speakers will be able to answer directly there. We will also have a Q&A section at the end, but I do suggest if you have any specific questions about a particular intervention to just drop them in the box in case the speakers need to leave earlier. And going through the agenda, I'm happy to have with us Emily Sims from the ILO, Julie Cournoyer from Fyffes, Susan Limisi from Fairtrade Africa, Tania Moodley from Tesco, Adela Torres from COLSIBA, and Marike de Peña from CLAC with us. We will go through different topics covered by gender, including some specifics on how to include gender equity or a gender lens in human rights due diligence processes, the business case for gender equity and human rights in general, and how they can actually help advance sustainable businesses. We will also hear from specific cases or initiatives from Fairtrade Africa, some specific tools and programs from Fyffes and Tesco, and we will then close with a very sensitive and important topic, which is addressing gender-based violence and harassment in the workplace with the help of COLSIBA and CLAC. So with that, I would like to give the floor now to Victor Prada, the Secretary of the World Banana Forum, to give the opening remarks of this webinar.
Yes, thank you very much, Valeria, for the excellent introduction to the topic. So, distinguished colleagues and dear participants, it is a great pleasure to welcome you all to this new session of the World Banana Forum Human Rights Due Diligence series. I'd like to thank each of you for taking the time to join us and for your continued commitment to advancing human rights and sustainability in the banana sector. Today's discussion, building a resilient banana industry through gender equity and human rights due diligence, takes place at a very timely moment. The new EU Omnibus Directive marks another step in the evolution of sustainability legislation, reminding us that companies must not only manage environmental and human rights risks, but also ensure that gender equity is part of every process. Gender equity is not a secondary issue. It is essential to human rights and to the strength of the sector. Millions of women contribute to the banana industry every day in plantations, quality control, logistics, and trade. Yet their work often remains undervalued. The new European framework challenges us to move beyond compliance to create systems and promote inclusion, safety, and equal opportunity for all. So this webinar, we will explore practical ways to connect gender-responsive policies and human rights due diligence and discuss how the Omnibus Directive can serve as a tool for real transformation. We are pleased to have with us today institutions such as the ILO or several industry partners who will share field experiences and concrete solutions for advancing equity in practice. I invite you all to take part of this session actively, share your views, and help us strengthen together the social foundations for the global banana industry. So I leave you in very good hands with Valeria, and please, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Victor. And without further ado, I would like to introduce now Emily Sims. She's a senior specialist in the ILO program on multinational enterprises and social policy, where she also manages the ILO help desk for business. She has extensive experience supporting governments, companies, and multi-stakeholder initiatives to integrate international labor standards into corporate policies and practices. Over the years, she has advised businesses on responsible supply chain management, due diligence, and social dialogue. Her work bridges the worlds of business and labor, helping enterprises align with global standards while promoting decent work. Emily, thank you so much for being with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Valeria. Shall I share my screen or are you going to? Okay, good. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you and to learn a bit more about your sector. I confess I don't know anything about bananas, so this is very interesting for me to be here and a privilege to speak with you. So briefly, in case any of you have never heard of the ILO, which is a fair bet, just to review a little bit what we do and where the standards I'm going to talk about are coming from. So we are a specialized agency of the United Nations, and we focus specifically on the world of work. We're a bit older, so our standards can sometimes be a bit older, but we update them as we go along. We have 187 member states, and we are rather unique in the UN system because we're tripartite, which means that the people sitting around and making decisions about what should go into a standard and voting for it to actually become a standard are not just governments, but also employers and workers. And they all have voting rights in decision-making power. We're headquartered in Geneva, but we have 40 offices spread across the various regions. Next slide. Our mission is to advance social justice and promote decent work for all. And decent work for all means more jobs, but also better jobs, which respect workers' rights, which has a direct link to human rights due diligence. And the way we do that is through social dialogue, because although there's a fair amount of overlap of interests between employers and workers, there are sometimes competing interests, and identifying the best way to find the right balance between workers' interests and employers' interests is through social dialogue, where we can share and come to a common understanding and agreement about the way forward. And the importance of social protection, because not everyone is able to work for a variety of reasons. And our principal means of action is standard setting and technical assistance to governments and our social partners, meaning our employers and workers. So let's unpack the standard setting part as it relates to gender. We have quite a few instruments that concern gender equality or gender equity. The basic ones that are very specific about gender are core conventions, meaning that all member states must respect them, even if they don't ratify them. They concern equal remuneration and discrimination, which includes as one of the 7 prohibited bases of discrimination as gender. But we also have complementary core non-discrimination conventions around workers with family responsibilities and violence and harassment at work, which not exclusively is gendered, but it has a very strong gendered component. But we also have broader gender relevant instruments that include maternity protection and, for instance, domestic workers convention, because although not all domestic workers are women, the vast majority are women. And so there's a lot of gender considerations going into that convention. But across all of our standards, we have a very important step in developing them, that is looking at every standards that's in the process of development through a gendered lens to ask what might be the differential impacts between men and women for whatever standard we are setting, so that it's gender mainstreamed. Next slide. So the central role of gender equality for respecting human rights and achieving the SDGs is another very important focus for us. We are responsible for SDG 8 on decent work and inclusive economic growth. And as I mentioned, gender is a very critical pillar of all of our work. But there's also, of course, SDG 5 itself, which is on gender equality. And so it's a fundamental right, and without it, there can be no social justice, which is our critical objective as the ILO. But closing the gender gap can significantly boost GDP, which is critical for achieving all of the SDGs, from elimination of poverty and hunger through education, access to healthcare, etc. And a human-centered approach to the future of work requires the collective capacity of all individuals, so leaving no one behind, including women and young girls, in terms of education, skills development, and ability to contribute and advance in their chosen occupation or other contributions to the world of work. So that means not restricting or neglecting anyone's rights, including women and girls. Next slide, sorry. And so just a reminder from the Human Rights Working Group on Business, the UN Working Group on Business and Human Rights, which has a whole series of working papers actually on gender mainstreaming for effective human rights due diligence. They recognize and have widely documented that women and girls experience adverse impacts of business activities differently and often disproportionately, and they also face additional barriers to seeking access to effective remedy. And therefore, business enterprises have a responsibility to avoid infringing women's human rights and to address adverse human rights impacts which affect them, with which they are involved. And to discharge this responsibility, business enterprises should contribute to achieving substantive gender equality and avoid exacerbating or reproducing existing discrimination against women throughout their operations, including in their supply chains. Next slide. So that link between their operations and their supply chains leads us to a human rights due diligence lens. Of course, human rights due diligence is both for a company's own operations, but also for its business partners. So applying a gendered lens, bearing in mind the findings of the UN Working Group, mean that a gendered lens reveals risks that might otherwise go unnoticed because of the distinct and sometimes disproportionate impacts, and that women often face higher risks of workplace harassment, violence, or unsafe conditions in particular. And the gender-sensitive human rights due diligence process ensures these risks are recognized and addressed appropriately. Next slide. So just a word on what we're talking about when we're talking about gender. ILO takes a broad approach. So in many instances, it's not just specific to women and girls, but includes men, in particular regarding issues where men are often overlooked, such as workers with responsibility, or men in women-dominated occupations where the default assumption about what is a typical worker becomes a woman rather than a man, and therefore gender-sensitive lens in such a situation would mean paying special attention to the particular needs of men. And it also includes gender identity and sexual orientation. Next slide. It also means that we take an intersectional approach because, as many of you working in this area of gender equity, you are fully aware that it's not just about gender, but the compounding impacts of different inequalities, which could further exacerbate gender inequalities for particular workers. And those other forms of discrimination include issues such as social class, ethnicity, age, and disability. And when you use an intersectional lens, you can identify much more precisely the specific barriers faced by different groups and develop targeted interventions that take a whole of gender equality approach. So just a kind of reminder, gender is across a whole bunch of issues. It's not just who you hire, or a lot of people think, okay, it's equality and access to employment, but also maybe wages. But it's a whole range of issues, not just recruitment or pay and benefits, but hours of work and rest, paid holidays, of course, maternity protection, job assignments, performance assessments, training opportunities, promotion, workplace environment, social security, occupational safety and health, handling of grievances, and termination of employment. But there are probably many others that I have missed myself. But also just a reminder, gender inclusiveness also refers to human rights due diligence stakeholder engagement, which is an area that's often overlooked. Next slide. So just a few training opportunities for you here. Thank you, Valeria, for reminding me to do a little promotion on what sorts of training resources we have for you. We have coming up an online course that's specific to gender equality, responsible business conduct, and human rights due diligence. Of course, it's only in the area of labor-related human rights, but it might be a good starting point for some of you that are getting started in this field. There's also, for those of you who are really keen to improve your, to up your game, shall we say, in gender equality, there's also a fairly technical but very interesting course on ILO participatory gender audits. And our last slide coming up is my domain, the ILO Help Desk for Business on International Labor Standards. It's a free and confidential service that you can write to me or look on our website. It's got all sorts of tools and resources. It also has a section on questions and answers for common questions that companies have been asking. So you can maybe see what everyone else is asking about and whether or not you've already ticked that box, or maybe it's something you should look into. But anyway, it's a free and confidential service. You just type in ILO Help Desk for Business and it'll pop right up. And we look forward to assisting you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Emily, for that overview of what the ILO has been doing on the topic of gender equity. I think it's a very good reminder that the ILO treats this topic in a focused way with particular center standards, but also in a cross-cutting way, which is how we are expecting gender to be addressed also in a daily basis. And I thought it was very interesting what you said about this certain topics that sometimes the gender lens is overlooked in due diligence processes, and the importance of guaranteeing the involvement and participation of women and their views whenever human rights due diligence processes are being carried on. And also, I think this is a great tool for all the participants in the audience to know about in terms of I've tried it myself in terms of every possible topic in the world of labor. I think it's a very interesting view in terms of the obligations the multinational companies sometimes face in terms of their supply chain. And I think this is very valuable from the human rights perspective, human rights due diligence perspective that we're trying to approach. Thank you so much, Emily. And with that, I would like to now move towards the particular program and initiatives that Fyffes has been implemented. With us, we have Julie here. She's the Global Director of Sustainability at Fyffes, where she leads the company's sustainability strategy and drives its environmental, social, and governance goals. She has overseen the rollout of ambitious targets tied to carbon reduction, food waste, and social responsibility, aligned with the company's commitment to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Julie brings deep experience in corporate sustainability, previously serving in senior roles focused on CSR in the business sector. Julie, thank you so much for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Valeria. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity today to share a little bit more about Fyffes' work in the sphere of gender equality. Today we'll look very briefly on Fyffes' gender equality strategy, our program, some of the implementation challenges we're facing, but also success factor that our program led us to, and key outcomes. So Fyffes has been conducting human rights impact assessments since 2019, and these have always highlighted that gender discrimination and gender-based violence are priority risk area in our supply chain, but particularly in agricultural related part of our business, so farming context, and also particularly in Latin America. A key contributing factor is historically, culturally, how the work in the workplace has been segregated, where women are often concentrated in lower paying roles, and men will dominate higher skilled and leadership position. Also very blatant reality is that women face the triple work burden. So they have to balance between work, domestic responsibility, caregiving responsibility, and this limits some of their opportunity in terms of both economic growth, but also professional growth. They have limited also time to allocate to pursuing higher education, for instance. This was also further reaffirmed in a recent multi-dimensional poverty index survey we conducted. This survey talked to various women employed within the banana sector within Fyffes, but also in general in the rural community surrounding our farm. This further reaffirmed that these are some of the factors that prevent women from adhering to supervisor or managerial role, and the key one being their key duty. This allowed us to understand better through, I would say, a gender-based lens, what are the barriers that women are facing, so that we can look in how we can improve working condition and eventually their livelihood. And part of our strategy on gender was to have a target. Our initial target was really focusing on capacity building by bringing gender equality programs to all workers in our own farm, and also eventually bring this through our supply chain to suppliers. So we'll see a little bit more today what is exactly our program. But before going to the program, if you go to the next slide, when we look at this in the context of broader human rights impact and human rights due diligence, you can see that being a caregiver has an impact on various basic human rights. So the top personal consequence for women as caregiver will include mental health struggle, additional stress, lack of rest because they accumulate a lot of hours with a lot of responsibility during the day, and little or basically no time for recreation, self-care, or medical checkup. So you can see here, it has kind of a domino effect outside of the workplace, also into their personal life. Many caregivers will report absenteeism, fatigue. They'll be looking to changes in work schedule to be able to attend their caregiving demands. And also, when you look at caring as an expense in a household, what the study confirmed is that it was the second largest household expense for employee families after food. And it was even in some cases higher than rent, or any payments of loans that they have to fulfill. So it is a key issue. And it is something that I think, if can be tackled, can bring multiple benefits. If you go to the next one. So Fyffes has been investing in capacity building and gender equality programs since 2019. But recently, earlier this year, we launched a new audio learning program that is designed to talk about these critical gender topic, but do it in an engaging, accessible, and impactful way for workers. We also wanted to tackle these topics not only in the workplace, but in the context of family and in the context of community, because we understand that also there's some cultural root cause to the persistence of gender inequality in Latin America. The audio learning program consists of 10 episodes. It is kind of a form of a podcast, which is a format that's quite popular nowadays. And it touched upon various topics, communication, sexual health, nutrition, family planning, domestic violence, to name a few. And each episode will include either dramatization, but also interviews with experts such as doctors, nurses, people from Fyffes, nutritionists, or psychologists. And the idea is to try to reach as many workers from Fyffes, but also from our supplier, but beyond, from their families and from their community. And we do this through some WhatsApp groups where we really try to raise awareness, first to go and listen to the podcast, but also to give information after each episode is aired. So if we have an episode on sexual health, for instance, with an expert, we'll try to give tools or reference of certain professional in the different countries or regions where we operate that they can access to. So it could be from their national governments, it could be from NGOs, so that they are really fully equipped if some of these topics bring something to their attention and they want to take further action. A topic that was also often raised through engagement with workers through this program is financial education. So we've decided to push this a little bit further and do a very detailed online tutorial on financial education. And the feedback we've been receiving from workers throughout the year was that this was really a topic that was very, very beneficial from them. And we see often that even in managing finance within a household, the woman is often left on the side and doesn't really have any decision into it. So this is helping also change this stigma and having the woman have a little bit more voice into managing finance of the household. If you go to the next one, please. So the program was launched, as I said, a little bit earlier this year. It was launched in all of our own farm, and now we're bringing it to our supplier, key supplier farm. So we've adapted a little bit the program so that it was a little bit more Fyffes agnostic. We have a lot of very interesting people that are talking on the podcast. We have people from our supplier, from foundations of our supplier. We've invited Victor to participate in one of our podcasts. Marike is also speaking in one. So I think it's very unique to the banana industry and is really tailored to the reality of the banana industry or pineapple industry or any fresh produce in Latin America. Also, it is publicly available, so anyone can access it. It's on YouTube. And I think I forgot to mention that it's not only in Spanish, but also available in English. If you go to the next one. We face some implementation challenges, but I think all of these are more technical and can be easily resolved. Time and resource investment beyond developing the program you need to make sure that you'll create awareness around it, and that people are willing to go and join the WhatsApp community, to go and sit down during their personal time to listen to the podcast and the episode. So we need to take time to invest into this. We had, for example, some connectivity issues, whereas while these awareness campaigns were happening, the worker couldn't scan the QR code to join the WhatsApp community. So we learned from that. When we did others, we unblocked the Wi-Fi during the awareness event so that everybody can leave with the QR code scan and have joined the WhatsApp community so they can access this later on. Sometimes there's different sensitive topic that could be more difficult to listen to in a context where there's people in your surroundings. So for example, we do play some episode on the bus ride to work. So obviously, themes like sexual harassment was a theme that we decided not to air in a public setting, and we leave it to the worker to listen to it in their own environment. And of course, sometimes there's resistance from management on certain topic. There are certain topic that are usually not addressed, again, linked to the cultural context, or people are not comfortable to talk about it. Domestic violence is one often that I like to cite, because even though the national statistic in some country tell a certain story, when you go to speak to the worker, what they tell you is something different, and we suspect it's because they don't necessarily either see it as an issue, it's ingrained, or they're not comfortable to talk about it. On the other end, success factor, the podcast style is really working. I think, once you have joined the community, everybody has access to YouTube. It's very easy to share, to interact. You can like the video. You can even share it with your family. And we've been told that certain parents really liked certain module because they were talking about topic they wouldn't be comfortable talking with their kids. So for example, teen pregnancy can be a topic that is also taboo and difficult to discuss at home. So they've been using the podcast with certain specialists to bring, or at least open dialogue on these issues with their teenagers. This brings better reach, so wider audience. And finally, we think that this is a program that's meant to evolve. So right now we have 10 episodes. We're looking to get feedback from the worker, and we will continue to develop some material and content to deep dive on whatever topic is most interesting to our worker based on the feedback we're receiving. And maybe to conclude, of course, key outcome, this is something that takes time. Culture takes time to change. Barriers takes also time to be removed. But awareness is, the first step forward. Through these type of capacity building, we've been able to also empower the gender community. They often refer to the program, and it helps them increasing engagement with the workers. Some of the topic that came to our attention through all of these either human rights impact assessment grievances we receive is the topic of sexual harassment, and we've done extensive training into this because we realize it was a recurring issue across many operations, and that's a topic that we continue to really, really reinforce. We also got some recommendation from workers. A very good example was the frequency we were paying employee in a certain country wasn't aligned with the frequency that they had to pay for childcare. And with just a simple change as adapting our pay frequency to the pay frequency of the childcare, completely removed a level of stress and challenges for families. We want to use the multidimensional poverty index we did as a baseline survey to better measure outcome over time. So this is something we plan to redo within a 2 to 3 year framework to see if all the efforts and actions we're taking are having an impact and are really changing some of the KPIs that we've measured. And we want to also internally have better KPIs. So we want to start tracking, women, how they're moving into improved position. Are they gaining an increased representation in more senior role across the farm? And we hope with the project that we currently have on the way, which is childcare in 2 countries. Right now, we're really working closely with governments to establish childcare close to our farm. That will trigger women to either access better position or continue their education, and that's something we could measure and see improvement over time. So in a nutshell, this is a very quick summary of quite a few years of work in this area. But this is definitely a priority for Fyffes, and we see this to continue to be a key issue over time, looking at, for example, challenges around labor shortages that the agricultural sector is facing in certain countries. We really need to tap into the talent of women and eliminate these barriers so that we can provide better livelihoods.
Thank you so much, Julie, for that presentation on what Fyffes has been doing so far. I think it's amazing. All the examples you've given us show very clearly the connection between the business, the communities, and the workers. This is not, I think it's very clear from your presentation and also the outcomes and lessons learned that this is not philanthropy, but rather it's connected to the impact that also workers and communities may have in the business, both positive and negative. And that by not working on the professional development of women, companies are also missing out on half of the population in the world, and that gender barriers need to be addressed, also considering the specific cultural settings that banana industries usually are on. I see that some participants have left some questions for you in the Q&A, so feel free, please, to just answer the ones that are connected to your presentation. And again, thank you so much for that overview of what Fyffes has been doing in the region. And with that, I would like to introduce now Dr. Susan Limisi from Fairtrade Africa. She is the gender coordinator there, and in this role, she plays a crucial part in advancing gender equality within Fairtrade certified producer organizations across the region. She is actively involved in ensuring that Fairtrade standards promote gender equity in the workplace and addressing systemic biases and challenges faced by women in agriculture. She emphasizes the importance of institutionalizing programs like the Women's School of Leadership across all products and throughout Africa to create lasting change. Dr. Susan Limisi, thank you so much for being with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So thank you so much for the invitation and for having me here, and great to hear the great works that the others are doing that have just shared before me. So I'll just quickly get to what we are doing as Fairtrade Africa, and I want to start by just letting you know who we are and what we are really up to. We work across the agriculture value chain, and we work in 29 countries, though this keeps changing depending on, like we get new subscribers coming in, new people joining the movement. So we've divided the continent into 4 parts. We have the North Africa, Middle East, and the North African network, which we refer to as MENA region. And there we work in not just the countries that have been written there, but there are others that may not have been mentioned here, but we just picked on the key countries that we work in. Then we work in West African network region, where we have 10 countries that we are specifically working in, and we have a producer network of 500 357 who are in the movement. Our main product there being cocoa and also banana. Banana is also our core product in West Africa. Good to know that you are also focusing on bananas. And we have the East and Central Africa Network, where we have different products. Besides the coffee, flowers, tea, we have other products that are also produced in the region. And finally, we have the Southern Africa Network, and our main products there are sugar, tea, wine. Other products like vanilla, of course, in Madagascar, we have herbs and spices, dry fruits, and so forth. So in total, we work with right now about 1.6 million farmers and workers in these particular regions. And we support them right from production all the way to the marketing of their products. Yes, we could move to the next slide. So, as I said, we work with producer organizations, and we are really interested in empowering our farmers and even our workers. So our vision is really to see a world where these small producers and workers can enjoy a secure and also sustainable livelihood and be able to even make decisions for themselves, decide what the future would really mean for themselves. So empowerment is quite a key component within our organization. And for our mission, we are looking to it that at the end of the day, can we have farmers and workers who have experienced transformative changes, who are resilient, and they have some lastful impacts at the end of whatever they are doing in their various agricultural value chains? Yeah, thank you. Next slide. Apologies, you'll have to bear with some noise where I am. Okay, now coming over to what we do within the gender space. Now, the gender equality is one of the key components that is very dear to us. And working with small producer organizations, of course, there are many challenges that are experienced. But we have looked at it that if we can be able to work towards at least moving towards some gender equality so that we are able to mainstream gender within the various agricultural value chains where we work, then we are able to really talk about sustainable development. And so one of the things that we do is to ensure or to work towards them attaining economic rights. And here we are looking at, so how best can we be able to support them so that they also have equal access to resources and different resources. So when we talk about, for instance, the financial aspect, when we are looking at the markets, are they able to access the markets? So for example, the markets, what we do is to be able to ensure that there is fair trading, so that instead of them having the many middlemen who will, at the end of the day, you find that the profit margin is so reduced, then we see how best do we then connect our farmers, our producers to the markets so that they are able to directly sell their products and be able to benefit, get the maximum profits that they are supposed to get. And then the other aspect is leadership. And we are looking at, so who is it that we are missing within the leadership space? Because at the end of the day, if the representation is not there, if a particular gender is not represented within the decision-making spaces, their voices will not be considered, their needs will not be considered. And so working with this cadre of people right from production, a number of them, you will find that maybe the illiteracy levels have really marginalized them from these decision-making platforms, or because of maybe not having access to the resource itself, the rules are that they cannot access this leadership position. So what we do is to try and see how to support them so that they are able to navigate these terrains. And we've used different strategies to be able to support them, so that at the end of the day, we are having what we are considering inclusive leadership. And I can't say that we are there yet, but it is work in progress. And then protection is so important for us. So we are looking at the safety of the workers. When you consider issues, health and safety, safeguarding issues, these are very critical aspects. Harassment. And we are considering the fact that people spend more time within their workspaces or where they are earning their livelihood. So if that particular space is not safe enough for them, in terms of even the inputs that go into there, is it the chemicals, is it just having an enabling environment to then support them be able to get what they're supposed to get. So this is a very critical aspect for us. The aspects of discrimination. Everyone needs to enjoy, their stay within their workspace so that they are able to maximize on their potential. So this is very critical for us. And then the capacity building aspect, because if knowledge to us, we consider, and I'm sure all of us bear this with me, that when people are informed, when you have a population that is knowledgeable, when they know, this already in itself is empowerment. So what we have done is to come up with programs then that can support our producer organizations at different levels. Yes, somebody may have missed the education within the learning curve, but then what can we be able to do so that we are sort of igniting that which is already inbuilt in them, so that they are able to also, kind of leverage with the rest. Yeah, thank you. Next slide. Thank you. So, and when we talk about fair trade, in Fair Trade Africa, one thing that is important for us are the fair trade standards. Anybody who belongs to the fair trade movement subscribes to what we call the fair trade standards. The fair trade standards are really human rights standards, ethical principles that govern the day-to-day operations of our producer organizations, of our farmers. And because of the benefits that come with it, we have had people voluntarily join the fair trade movement. And maybe because of time, I didn't share off a slide that shows how then we connect with this. But we have an independent body that does the audits. So we have the FLOSAT who audits using the fair trade standards, who then audits whoever joins the fair trade movement to ensure compliance. And some of the things that we look at, and I just speak to what is there, what relates to gender. One of them is the aspect of discrimination, so that we are really keen on having non-discrimination, and we have policies. We ensure that there are policies that govern the treatment of people, the farmers, the workers within their various producer organizations. And we look at aspects, even the policies, they need to take care of even the vulnerable groups. Now that we work across different spaces within the continent, we are looking at different vulnerable groups. You look at the immigrants, you're looking at the persons with disability. You're looking at even marginalized tribes. How then can whatever policies that have been put in place by the organizations also contribute to enabling the work environment be conducive for all these people? And so that nobody feels discriminated or marginalized by virtue of these things that end up discriminating them. Then, of course, to enhance the workplace, make it more conducive, we have the gender committees. We've established gender committees that are then supposed to be able to support the producer organization. Why the gender committees is because when you look at, for instance, production, right at the lower cadre, so these committees help to then sort out the issues, because that's where we have maybe the higher population. But people are able to, the gender committees actually, they're formed by the workers themselves or the farmers, and they choose the people themselves, but of course we train them so that then they are able to support the producer organizations. Everybody else they can be able to raise issues regarding, the gender-related issues, if it is sexual harassment, if it is the issues of maybe participation, decision-making processes, and so forth. They can be the voice of the workers or the farmers. And then we have premiums. Now, in Fairtrade Africa, one of the things when you join the Fairtrade movement is that we support in negotiating the prices for the producers, so that at the end of the day, because of the ethical production of whatever produce they do, then the buyer is also pays something on top of the minimum price, which comes back as premium for the workers and to support the farmers. And they have been able to use these premiums for various things. You will find that there are some of those things that may not be taken care of by the employer. Look at issues like maybe sanitary pads. Let me mention that. The premiums, they will decide, okay, we will use this part of the premiums to provide sanitary pads for the whole year for all the workers. If both the men and the women will come for them, because the men may be having their own sisters or their wives, or they'll have daughters and so forth, they can be able to take. We have issues to do with programs that take care of the children. For instance, the crashes, so that the mothers, when they come to work, they can leave their babies there, the babies are taken care of, and they feel safe. Or even breastfeeding spaces, so that a mother does not have to really wait until they go home to breastfeed their children. They have space to do that. Some have even gone ahead, they'll buy for them, like things like breast pumps and all that. They look small, but these are things that, for example, for lactating mothers, they will make them very comfortable, and they'll be able to be very productive because they don't have to then worry about their children back at home. Then we have the capacity building. This is very, very important for us, working with farmers. Some of them may have dropped out of school at a very early age. So we have programs where we then support them to be able to build their skills in leadership, in financial literacy, even in planning and different other aspects, even relating to their own agricultural value chain, either maybe good production skills and all that. So for us, the standards then form a framework beyond just compliance, but they foster an environment where gender equality becomes integral to organizational culture and long-term sustainability. So it's like a way of life for us in Fairtrade Africa. Yes. And so in the farms, what exactly do we do? One of our flagship programs is the Women's School of Leadership. The Women's School of Leadership first started off because of the need that we saw, especially with women who form the bulk of the workers within producer organizations, and they'll be on the lower cadre. They'll be the one in the production end, but not in the leadership positions. And one of the issues was because of the illiteracy levels that is so high. Within Africa, that is a reality. So with the Women's School of Leadership, it helps to enhance their capacity in various ways. It comes in 10 modules, runs through a period of 1 year, but for every module, they are able to practically practice, so that at the end of the day, we have actually reported very, very good results on this. And then we have the gender-based violence prevention, which is very important for us in the farms, especially in the hired labor. In the hired labor, and because of the kind of living, the way people live, either in camps or sort, we have a lot of the gender-based violence being experienced, sexual harassment. And so what we have done is to establish, support our producers, come up with very good policies, policies, let me know, say good policies to help them curb these menaces, and to also have reporting structures and support them to be able to do the same. And then the financial inclusion is also very critical, linking them to credits and saving programs. We have the issue of land rights advocacy, especially for women. You know, in Africa, access to, and land ownership for women is a critical thing. Most communities are patriarchal. Land belongs to the men, resources belong to the men. So being able to support them, advocate to get access to this land and be able to own land, that has also been a very important aspect. So we have, with this, we have had 75% women participation, increasing their participation in various leadership positions. We have 40% growth, at least average income increase for women participating in the Women's School of Leadership programs. We have 250 cooperatives implementing comprehensive gender policies, which to us is a plus. And we believe that going forward, these numbers would go up. Yeah, and lastly, just to look at a case study, for instance, within our Fairtrade organization, the flower farms. Now, within the flower farms, I don't know, you people work in the banana, but within the flower farms, one thing that you will realize is that the workers, a majority of them are women, and at very, very young ages, not underage, but the middle ages, you know, the active years. So many of them work within the flower farms, and they are really exposed to a number of risks. For instance, harassment. We have the issues of pay gaps, not just within the flowers. I'm sure even in other sectors, this is also experienced as a challenge. The job insecurity. Some of them have migrated because they came, somebody told them they'll get a job for them. So you find women are a majority. And as such, they are normally economically unstable, and the workplace is not very safe for them. So what Fairtrade Africa we have done is to ensure that we work together with the organizations, we work with the workers, we work with the farmers to see to it that we can have a safe environment for them. And some of the actions that are really working for us is this Women's School of Leadership program, and we can, we have results where we have a number of graduates who have come out and they have even grown into leadership positions. Somebody came in as a casual worker, eventually they end up even in a managerial role. We have the gender committees that are helping to address risk. We have the premiums that are supporting various enterprises. We have policies that are being implemented to then ensure that there is equality, and even in terms of pay, in terms of promotions. And so when we look at the measurable outcomes, we see significantly safe workplaces. We have increased number of women in management positions. We have a stronger workforce in decision-making processes, and they're really influencing a lot within the flower farms. So this case actually demonstrates how systemic gender integration in fair trade practices can create ripple effects and benefiting not only individuals, but also transforming entire workplace culture and the community as a whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Susan, for that insightful presentation on what Fairtrade is doing. I think Fairtrade is a great example of how gender inclusivity is covered through different ways in different parts and different components of what Fairtrade does in supporting their members, both on their policies and requirements, but also in the programs they implement to help them. With that, I would like to move on with the next presentation because we're running a little bit late. Next, we have Tania Moodley with us. Tania is a responsible sourcing manager at Tesco with extensive experience driving human rights sustainability and ethical sourcing strategies across complex supply chains. She leads Tesco's efforts to integrate gender, environmental, and social considerations into sourcing practices. Tania has worked extensively across Africa, engaging suppliers and stakeholders to address challenges regarding labor rights and inequalities in agricultural supply chains, and plays a key role in aligning business operations with international standards. Tania, thank you so much for being with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Valeria. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone online. I've been asked to present our gender supplier toolkit to you. And in doing so, I just wanted to place it into context. If you look at the next slide, our gender toolkit is part of our focus area on gender. And what you're seeing in front of you is our human rights and responsible sourcing strategy, with our overall objective being respect and supporting the human rights of workers and communities in our business and our supply chains. And within that, we have 4 key strategic pillars. The first is around anti-slavery, specifically preventing modern slavery and supporting victims. We have our second strategic focus pillar, which is around gender equity. And here we look specifically at supporting women realize their potential. Our other 2 strategic focus areas involve sustainable livelihoods and worker representation. And our gender toolkits sits within our strategic focus area on gender, specifically our part of our gender strategy. And interestingly enough, when we started developing our gender strategy, we were also facing an assessment on our business practices by external stakeholders, particularly at Oxfam. And in 2018, they actually assessed our approach to gender and found that we scored 5%, which actually was a signal to us as a business that we needed to actually strengthen our approach on gender. And interesting enough, 5 years later, when we were assessed, and we were assessed annually, which actually shows you the journey that we had taken in developing our gender strategy. At the end of 5 years, when the campaign ended and we were assessed, we scored, I think, 76%, which actually shows the journey we had undertaken to get to that position. So there was a lot of hard work and emphasis on strengthening our approach to gender in our supply chains. You'll see some core building blocks, which we considered to be the foundation of our human rights strategy. And these encompass our policy and public commitments, all our governance systems and our management processes, our due diligence, which is broader than just an audit compliance approach. We also have a focus on risk and opportunity management, and obviously our engagement and reporting. So we consider those our core building blocks for our human rights and our responsible sourcing strategy. In our next slide, I wanted to focus specifically on the gender toolkit. Our gender strategy focuses on 4 key areas. The first is addressing sexual harassment and discrimination. The second is around women in leadership. The third is around looking at increasing women's voices in the workplace. And the fourth is addressing gender stereotypes. And so when we looked at our strategic focus area on women in leadership, we knew that we couldn't do this on our own. We needed our suppliers to work with us, which is why at the time we set an ambition for all our first-tier suppliers across food and non-food where we looked at least 30% of women to be in management and supervisory positions by 2025. And we just didn't just set the ambition and walk away. We also acknowledged that this will be particularly challenging for some suppliers, which is why we approached Oxfam to help us develop tools which would help support our suppliers to actually achieve this ambition. So it's a resource that's aimed at our first-tier food and non-food suppliers across different product areas and across the globe. The toolkit provides very practical advice and guidance to support women to progress and thrive at work. It also offers some key concrete steps and actions to tackle and remove the barriers that impact on women workers. And it provides recommendations to create a safe and inclusive workplace for everyone. So when you look at the toolkit, if you look at the next slide, it focuses on 3 key areas. It looks at recruitment, progression, and retention. Moving on, I'll unpack this a little bit more. So whilst it focuses on the 3 key areas, it also offers some spotlight topics. It looks at addressing gender stereotypes. It looks at a very important area, which is unpaid care work. And it also looks at the impact of gender-based violence. Looking at how the toolkit came about and why it is important, I think previous speakers have emphasized this. Gender equality is a human right, and businesses, including ourselves, acknowledge that we have an important role to play to support women workers to thrive. It is about taking action to address gender issues that can help create a positive and productive working culture for all workers. Conversations with suppliers during the development of the toolkit, some of the feedback that we got was that this was such a broad area that suppliers didn't know where to start, which is one of the reasons why we developed the toolkit in itself. And it's also about actively increasing women's representation at different levels, because I think we know from research an inclusive workplace can lead to increased efficiency, productivity, and retention. So in terms of how it's been developed, Oxfam came on board and undertook an enormous amount of desktop research and pulling together existing resources to try and understand what was currently out there. We held focus group discussions with both women and men workers across the globe in different parts of the world, just to understand their challenges and how we could respond to those challenges within the toolkit. We had interviews and surveys with suppliers, worker representatives, and gender experts. We also developed a gender reference group during the development of the gender toolkit, which was made up of suppliers. And we also had consultation and input from our own internal stakeholders. Moving on. So let's look at what it is, what encompasses the gender toolkit. Now, if you look at it in its entirety, it's probably about 100 pages, which is quite overwhelming, to say the very least. And that was some of the feedback that we got from suppliers. But when you actually break down on exactly how you can utilize it, it's very practical and actually very user-friendly. So if we look at some of the contents in the next slide, like I said, it is made up of 3 sections together with the spotlight topics, but it offers also a collation of resources, which Oxfam has pulled together that's in existence today. It is color-coded as well, which makes for easy moving through the manual. And there's always a home button as you go through the toolkit that will bring you back to the contents page and makes for easier maneuvering. If you look at the next slide, I just want to briefly touch on how we use it and how suppliers actually can bring this to life. And the first thing suppliers need to do when they actually start on this journey of utilizing the toolkit is complete a needs assessment. And this needs assessment just helps the individual or the business identify potential gaps or areas that they can actually strengthen if they are currently undertaking some of the activities. It looks at key actions, which is based on recommended activities, and we split this into 3 groupings where individual businesses could identify where they are, which is beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And when you look at who can utilize it, it's different teams, internal teams. It could be utilized by the Human Resource Department, your Compliance Department, your Operations and Sourcing and Sustainability Department. So it's wide-reaching in its use. It's not particularly aimed at an individual or department within that business. And what is to identify a agenda champion at senior management level to make sure that all the actions are joined up across the business. We offer in the toolkit some case studies, and this is based on actual good practice from our supply base, where suppliers have come forward and they've shared how they've tackled a particular issue where they've had successes in, and we've documented that. We also provide additional information, some key actions, and the homepage helps you navigate. So if you move on the toolkit itself, it just offers you a very quick look at your needs assessment and understanding your internal environment. And we recommend that everyone who's utilizing the toolkit starts with this step. It helps you understand your workforce, but it also helps you understand your business strategy. And when you look at some of the questions, it helps you understand whether you monitor gender disaggregated data, for example, around who is currently in your workforce in terms of the proportion of women in supervisory and management roles. It also helps you understand your business strategy in terms of challenging you around setting a specific measurable target for the proportion of women to occupy supervisory and management roles, for example. So once you complete the needs assessment, it then takes you on to the next area. And if you look at the next slide, it touches on recruitment. And whether you go to recruitment, retention, or progression, the toolkit is divided into these key areas. It touches on why this area of focus is important. It also highlights some key barriers that prevent women from being recruited into these businesses. It looks at what good looks like, and it highlights a case study that we had gotten from suppliers. And it also provides you with some key actions, dividing those key actions into the kind of beginner, intermediate, and more advanced role. And it also provides you with some resources that you can actually access. If you move on to the next slide, an example of this would be looking at some of the key barriers. And I must just say at this point that these are not exhaustive in its nature. These are just some of the examples that we've put in that are faced by businesses. And these can be changed or can look different depending on the context or the country that the business is operating in, but highlights some of the barriers, for example, how women can be discriminated against during the recruitment processes, especially if you have a single entry point where there might be some biasness involved, to low levels of literacy or formal education amongst women workers, which actually prevents them from even applying for jobs in the first place. If you move on, this focuses on the case studies. So once we've identified some of the key barriers, we also highlight some of the examples of good practice based on activities that suppliers are currently doing. It provides you with an overview of those types of activities, and it also provides some suggestions for activities that can be applied in practice. One of the key things that has come through in these case studies, it highlights approaches that tackle the root causes rather than systemic systems of issues. If you move on to the next slide, I mentioned moving forward and some key actions to take. The toolkit also offers this based on where you are as a business. So if we're looking at transparent and fair recruitment processes and treatment for women and men, and if you identify as a business as a beginner, now you've just recently started on this process, you might have some processes in place, but not all. What this toolkit does is offers you some suggested activities that you can undertake as a beginner. Your intermediate activities is meant as a build-on from your beginner activities. So once you've strengthened your baseline, you can then move on to additional activities in terms of strengthening your recruitment processes and making them more gender sensitive. To an advanced supplier, where suggested activity could include ensuring that there's a certain percentage of women on every interview panel. So those are some very clear, concrete actions that businesses can take on. Moving on. So I know that one of the questions is going to be, where can this be accessed? So this toolkit is publicly available. It can be downloaded off the Oxfam website. And we've had some very impressive feedback thus far. The toolkit has been downloaded over 291 times. It's included 78 corporates, some well-known names, 50 NGOs, government departments, academic departments, individuals, and other. And some of the feedback that we've heard from suppliers is that their turnover rate has significantly decreased once they implemented the toolkit. Others have felt that, rightfully so, it felt like a huge challenge at the start, but it's also really helped them move forward. Some suppliers have said it's put gender on their agenda where it wasn't previously. One of the ways that we felt we could also support suppliers adopt this toolkit was through mentoring. And so we invited suppliers across different product areas to come forward. And these are suppliers who either felt that they were struggling, they needed a lot more hand-holding. And so Oxfam was brought in to provide that additional support and help them develop from the risk assessment to their action plan and help them measure the impact. So in that way, we actually could be walking alongside suppliers as they went on this gender journey. And actually, that's really shown us some impressive outputs from suppliers. I think that's it from me. So very short example of a practical tool that we developed to support our suppliers on their gender journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tania. I think it was very resourceful to see and to understand the dynamic and the structure of the toolkit, and that it is available for different suppliers in different value chains to start working on the topic of gender. And I think it's also very interesting that your presentation started mentioning that this came up from a negative score, and it actually proved to be very useful in improving it in a very short period of time. I also wanted to highlight, I think it's quite important, this division that you guys have provided to the suppliers to understand that they might be in a different stage in this gender journey, and that there are different actions that all of us can do in our own position in the supply chain. So thank you so much for sharing this with us. We will be sharing as well the links to the different initiatives that the speakers have shared in the report, in case anyone has trouble finding them, but I can confirm that it's very easy to access. So thank you so much, Tania, again. And with that, I will switch to Spanish now, and I would like to introduce Adela Torres. Adela es una dirigente sindical colombiana y defensora de los derechos humanos. Actualmente coordina la Coordinadora Latinoamericana de Sindicatos Bananeros y Agroindustriales COLSIBA y es secretaria general de Sintra Inagro, el Sindicato Nacional de Trabajadores Agrícolas de Colombia. Con más de 30 años en el sector bananero, Adela ha sido clave en la promoción de los derechos laborales, la equidad de género y acuerdos colectivos que fortalecen las relaciones laborales. También impulsa la participación de las mujeres en las plantaciones y aboga por cadenas de suministro inclusivas y sostenibles. Adela, muchas gracias por estar con nosotros y empiezo a compartir tu presentación. Adelante.
Ok, Valeria, saludo para todos. Saludar a las compañeras que ya han participado en este panel tan importante y ver todas esas experiencias son muy significativas para nosotros como movimiento sindical. Bueno, entonces vamos a hablar un poco acerca de cómo abordar la violencia de género y el acoso en el lugar de trabajo. Si miramos nosotros desde COLSIBA, el trabajo de COLSIBA, digamos, desde el trabajo de COLSIBA, la violencia de género y el acoso en el lugar de trabajo se aborda con acciones sindicales, organizadas, concretas y con enfoque de género. Nosotros desde nuestras organizaciones sindicales hacemos todo un trabajo para que este proceso pueda llevarse a cabo. Se aporta el principio de que la violencia en el trabajo no es un problema individual, sino estructural que requiere cambios en la cultura laboral y en las relaciones de poder. Aquí tenemos que empezar a trabajar porque es un tema que a veces se mira como que es un tema de mujeres y que qué pereza a las mujeres, entonces no, es un tema que tenemos que trabajarlo todos para que pueda realmente ser abordado. Desde ese enfoque y desde ese trabajo nosotros empezamos a trabajar y pudimos tener algunos pilotos en relación a esto, por ejemplo, un comité de mujer que lo organizamos con Chiquita, COLSIBA y Huita. De esto hicimos un piloto de trabajo donde nos permitió que las mujeres pudieran la respetaran, le respetaran sus derechos, sus aspiraciones y derechos sin tener miedo. Todo este proceso lo hemos venido haciendo desde nuestras organizaciones sindicales miembros de COLSIBA. Podemos seguir, Valeria. Bueno, un proceso, ¿cómo lo seguimos haciendo? A través de las negociaciones colectivas. Nosotros siempre en nuestro proceso de negociaciones colectivas tratamos de incluir cláusulas que permitan ese respeto por el derecho al trabajo de la mujer, ese trabajo que la mujer hace día a día. Entonces, COLSIBA impulsa la inclusión de cláusulas específicas de género y contra el acoso en los convenios colectivos en los diferentes sindicatos miembros. Nosotros, a través de COLSIBA, la Secretaría de la Mujer de COLSIBA, desarrollamos 28 cláusulas y esas cláusulas están siendo incluidas en cada organización sindical que han podido tener la posibilidad de negociarla. No es fácil porque cuando se habla del tema de mujeres, el tema de género, en muchos, digamos, negociaciones o con los empresarios, no es muy bien visto, pero hemos seguido trabajando y podemos mirar algunos casos de ejemplo que tenemos, por ejemplo, en Costa Rica, el sindicato Citra logró incluir cláusulas que prohíben el acoso sexual y permiten denunciar sin pasar por la jefatura. O sea, se incluyó una cláusula en este convenio colectivo y no hay que ir a pedir permiso, sino que se puede denunciar. Esos son trabajos que hemos venido haciendo a través de COLSIBA, pero también de la UITA, que es otra de nuestras organizaciones miembros también internacionales, que estamos afiliadas a ella y desde ahí también impulsamos todo este proceso para que las mujeres puedan tener un clima diferente, un clima más acorde al trabajo que realizan con ese respeto y la participación activa de sus labores que realizan. Sigamos. Bueno, también podemos crear algunos protocolos sindicales y eso pues lo hemos venido trabajando en nuestras negociaciones colectivas, donde no existe protocolo de las empresas. Los sindicatos lo han creado. Estas garantizan que las denuncias sean tratadas con confidencialidad, sin represalias y con contenimiento sindical. O sea, que las mujeres puedan hacer su denuncia tranquila, que no tengan represalias, porque sabemos que a veces cuando se hace este tipo de denuncia, y lo vemos en muchas ocasiones, que las mujeres denuncian porque están viviendo un acoso sexual, un acoso laboral, pero entonces a eso no se le presta atención, sino que la mujer es la que la despiden. O en caso, si de pronto se tiene una relación con alguna persona en la finca, sea el jefe o sea algún compañero, entonces a la final la que sufre las consecuencias y pierde el empleo es la mujer. También podemos mostrar un ejemplo en Honduras. Digamos que los sindicatos bananeros establecieron comités de mujeres para recibir denuncias y actuar de forma inmediata. Todo este trabajo desde los sindicatos hemos venido trabajando y ustedes saben que tenemos también desde la Secretaría de la Mujer del Foro Mundial Bananero, hacemos todo un trabajo y precisamente por eso estamos desarrollando esto, porque hay una Secretaría de la Mujer, ahí estamos trabajando para la equidad de género, para todo ese respeto, entonces yo creo que es muy importante. Entonces las organizaciones hemos ido trabajando a medida que vamos desarrollando las cláusulas y vamos incluyendo en los contratos colectivos. Es muy complejo porque en ocasiones las mujeres en algunas organizaciones, en algunos países trabajan de manera informal. Se ve mucho abuso con estas mujeres también cuando trabajan de manera informal porque creen que como son informales, entonces todo el mundo tiene derecho a pisotearla y hacer con ella lo que les da la gana. Y en muchas ocasiones, muchas de ellas les toca ceder a estar con alguien para poder conservar el trabajo. Yo creo que es un tema que tenemos que trabajarlo y irlo erradicando porque de lo contrario va a seguir aumentando y eso no es lo que queremos para nuestras mujeres. Sigamos. También hacemos un proceso de formación de delegadas de género. En muchos países tenemos las delegadas sindicales que reciben formación para acompañar casos de acoso y orientar a las trabajadoras. Tenemos comité digamos, los comités obreros, que son las personas que están diariamente con los trabajadores en las plantaciones. Tenemos todo el tema de los comités de convivencia para que también estén pendientes. Sabemos que es un tema para hombres y mujeres, pero las mujeres tienen donde quejarse también y eso es lo que tenemos que ir estableciendo en nuestros convenios colectivos, que esto quede directamente registrado en esas convenciones colectivas. Pero están estos mecanismos también de queja que se pueden utilizar para que nuestras mujeres puedan tener un ambiente más seguro, un ambiente más sano, un ambiente que les permita trabajar de una manera libre y espontánea en su lugar de trabajo. Desde nuestras organizaciones sindicales estamos creando, también se han negociado cláusulas específicas para mujeres, como la no discriminación por edad y género. En nuestros convenios colectivos tenemos estas particularidades también, porque no se puede haber una discriminación, porque cuando me estás discriminando, me estás acosando también porque estás violando mi derecho al trabajo. En otros países como Guatemala también se han incluido cláusulas de respeto hacia las mujeres y yo creo que hemos ido avanzando en todo este proceso porque la verdad es que no nos podemos quedar quietos. En el caso de Colombia se ha creado una mesa tripartita donde participa el Ministerio del Trabajo, las empresas bananeras y Sintrainagro. Nosotros, mirando todo este tema de acoso laboral y acoso sexual, pues nos propusimos con el gremio bananero y el Ministerio de Trabajo de crear una mesa, y esta mesa, pues estamos hablando de un protocolo que todas las empresas deben adoptarla. Si bien es cierto, la hemos venido trabajando el sindicato en cabeza de la Secretaría de la Mujer de Sintra y Nagro, pero están todos los representantes de los departamentos de, de bienestar laboral, de recursos humanos, para que con este protocolo que ya a través de una caja de compensación que llama Confama, pues nos ha hecho todo el proceso, el proyecto, tenemos todo el proyecto de cómo aplicar este proyecto, pero también lo complementamos con el convenio 190 de la OIT, que ha sido ratificado en muchos países, recientemente en Colombia, en Costa Rica, también se ratificó en Honduras. Entonces yo creo que esto nos ayuda también a que este convenio 190 lo podamos trabajar y lo podamos poner en práctica para este tipo de procesos que se dan con las mujeres en las diferentes organizaciones, en las diferentes plantaciones. El tema de las plantaciones, el trabajo de las mujeres en las plantaciones es un trabajo bastante complejo, y ahí sí es muy importante que todos, y yo, todo lo que han presentado las compañeras, incluyendo Emily de la OIT, este trabajo que se dio en esta presentación, creo que ha sido de mucha importancia para nosotros, porque podemos basarnos mucho de estos procesos. Eudy, por favor, estoy en la reunión. De estos procesos de trabajo, que podemos implementar esta herramienta, que podemos implementar, y así nosotros también desde las organizaciones, de los campos donde estamos, poder trabajar con ellas y hacer que ese derecho se respete. Pero creo que conjuntamente con las empresas podemos mancomunadamente hacer un trabajo y nos va a dar muchos resultados. Sigamos. También utilizamos los canales seguros, anónimos, de denuncia, reubicando y protegiendo a las víctimas. Que las mujeres puedan, a través de estos canales, a través de los sindicatos, se han promovido la creación de líneas confidenciales donde las trabajadoras pueden denunciar sin miedo. Les cuento que para muchas mujeres, y en todas las organizaciones, las compañeras que expusieron ahora, que están en las plantaciones, a veces las mujeres les dan mucho miedo denunciar por represalia a que pierdan el trabajo o por ser estigmatizadas. Y en muchas ocasiones se quedan calladas. Nosotros les decimos, venga, y hay digamos, una confidencialidad para que ustedes puedan traer sus quejas, pero en ocasiones no la traen. Y entonces esto es un tema bastante complejo, porque seguimos mirando que nuestras mujeres siguen siendo abusadas, siguen siendo discriminadas, siguen siendo humilladas, porque para mí eso es una humillación cuando tú no puedes hablar y no puedes expresarte libremente de lo que tú sientes. Entonces también cuando hay riesgo se exige la reubicación inmediata de la trabajadora, garantizando su empleo y seguridad. En muchas ocasiones, cuando las empresas tienen varias fincas, pues ¿qué es lo que hacemos? A esta persona mándemela para otro lado para que no me la tenga aquí juntamente con su agresor, porque eso va a ser un peligro para ella, y exigimos eso. Desafortunadamente, en algunas plantaciones no se puede hacer el tema porque solamente es una sola plantación, y entonces entramos pues como ahí a un tema ya de empezar a controvertir y a trabajar en eso y hacer las denuncias y hablar con las empresas para que esta persona pueda ser separado, o sea, reubicado en otro lado, y que la mujer pueda tener esa garantía también de parte de su empleador. También, por ejemplo, lo decía el caso de Guatemala, una trabajadora embarazada que denunció acoso fue protegida y reincorporada gracias al apoyo de su sindicato local. Esta mujer se había despedido, se había abusado simplemente porque, bueno, por alguna situación, entonces pensaron que era tan sencillo, entonces pues se hizo todo este proceso y esta mujer pudo reintegrarse, porque ahí se violaron las leyes también, todos los convenios de de la OIT, pero se logró que la mujer y la compañera pudiera ser reintegrada nuevamente a su trabajo. Sigamos. Bueno, también promovemos la prevención y la educación. Entonces se realizan capacitaciones sobre género, acoso y derechos laborales dirigidos tanto a trabajadores como a empleadores. Porque aquí únicamente no hablamos del tema de la mujer, no únicamente vamos a capacitar a la mujer, sino que aquí hay que capacitar primeramente a los hombres y al empleador para que puedan tener esa conciencia de ese respeto y empezar a hacer un trabajo de más concientización y que ellos puedan entender que esta trabajadora está prestando un servicio laboral no para ser maltratada, no para ser acosada y no para ser discriminada, como en muchas ocasiones se tiene a la mujer como que si la mujer no sirviera para absolutamente nada. Entonces, pues nosotros hemos venido trabajando eso desde COLSIBA. Sé que todas las organizaciones aún no lo están haciendo, pero lo estamos trabajando. Ya hay muchas organizaciones, son poquitas las que de pronto no lo hacen, pero dentro de todo nuestro trabajo que hemos venido realizando, pues hicimos un diagnóstico donde encontramos todas estas falencias y eso se los entregamos a nuestras organizaciones para que ellos a partir de ahí, entonces empezarán también a identificar toda esta problemática que se presenta con las trabajadoras en las diferentes empacadoras. También tenemos ejemplo, caso de Ecuador, sindicato impulsaron campaña sobre nuevas masculinidades y respeto en el trabajo. En Honduras y Colombia se desarrollan procesos de formación específico a la generación de liderazgo sindical y femenino. Nosotros desde nuestras organizaciones hemos lanzado campañas, por ejemplo, nosotros desde Sintrainagro lanzamos una campaña que la titulamos En las fincas bananeras aceptamos mujeres, hicimos un diagnóstico sobre los derechos laborales, sexuales y reproductivos de las mujeres, pero también hace 3 años realizamos una campaña que la titulamos Construyendo futuro con perspectiva de género. Esta es una campaña también que íbamos a finca hablando con todos los trabajadores, porque como les digo, no solamente es a la trabajadora, sino que también hay que concientizar a los hombres y a los empleadores de respetar todo el proceso. Igualmente, pues todo lo que hemos venido haciendo desde COLSIBA, que hemos venido desde nuestras organizaciones miembros, haciendo pues como todo este trabajo de liderazgo, de empoderamiento a través de nuestra agenda que tenemos con 5 puntos, lo que tiene que ver con el tema del empleo, el tema de la educación. Hemos empoderado a muchas mujeres para que puedan ser representantes de los trabajadores en cada uno de sus sitios de trabajo. Cuesta, pero estamos en el proceso. Así que es como un poco todo lo que hemos venido trabajando. Sigamos, creo que ya. Y como conclusión, para COLSIBA, abordar la violencia de género en el trabajo significa prevenir, proteger, acompañar y transformar. Si no transformamos estos paradigmas, si no transformamos todo este proceso a través de los sindicatos, impulsando procesos de capacitación y de concientización, va a ser difícil. Y se hace con acción sindical directa, organización de base, participación activa de las mujeres trabajadoras. Yo creo que desde que las mujeres tengan ese respaldo de las organizaciones sindicales de manera seria y responsable, podemos tener una mayor participación efectiva en todos estos procesos. Y yo creo que lo que venimos haciendo todas las organizaciones, mire cuántas hemos expuesto y cuánto se está trabajando a nivel del mundo en relación al tema de la participación de las mujeres, de ese reconocimiento que tenemos las mujeres, que sí podemos hacer las cosas, pero tenemos que ser, nos tienen que también acoger como esas mujeres que no que nos vayan a cargar porque tenemos que estar aquí, no, sino que realmente apostamos y aportamos a la sociedad, a la construcción de todos los procesos, de las plantaciones, de los supermercados, de todo. Nosotras como mujeres también hacemos ese aporte más para trabajar. El tema es muy importante, muy interesante, pero como tenemos un tiempo limitado, yo pues me limito hasta ahí. Yo creo que cogí menos tiempo, mis compañeras tuvieron más tiempo, pero bueno, muchas gracias. Le dejo a Marike para que Marike termine ahí ya más reducido, ¿no?
Muchísimas gracias, Adela. Es muy interesante ver, creo que en las intervenciones anteriores hemos visto bastante el rol del sector privado en combatir la violencia de género, el acoso laboral, en búsqueda de esta igualdad y equidad de género, pero es muy interesante verlo ahora desde el punto de vista sindical, como tú bien mencionas. También hay un rol muy importante que jugar acá. Rescato algunas de las ideas que mencionaste sobre la importancia del liderazgo sindical de las mujeres, porque si las mujeres no están representadas, como en cualquier otro entorno, difícilmente sus perspectivas, sus problemas, sus necesidades sean abordadas adecuadamente en esos espacios. Y los sindicatos definitivamente son uno de esos espacios donde las mujeres también tienen que incorporarse con posiciones líderes. Y también quiero rescatar acá de manera quizás un poco interesada el rol que has mencionado también de los mecanismos de queja y la importancia de cubrir temas tan sistémicos y tan importantes como la violencia en el lugar de trabajo y la violencia de género en general en las comunidades bananeras o en el mundo agrícola. Creo que este es un tema muy importante que es que entendemos sobre todo desde una perspectiva cultural que es difícil de abordar y que tiene muchos ejes y muchos componentes que deben traerse, pero que definitivamente tenemos que ir paso a paso cambiando esta mentalidad, ¿no? Y como tercer idea que me queda clave, porque también alguien la mencionó en las preguntas, la importancia de incluir en estos procesos a los hombres porque finalmente todos estos problemas que estamos mencionando o desigualdades en el trabajo les competen a ellos también y es importante traerlos a la mesa de discusión y de capacitación definitivamente. Muchas gracias, Adela. Y con esto quisiera dar paso a nuestra última panelista que también nos va a presentar desde la perspectiva de CLAC cómo seguir abordando la violencia y el acoso en el mundo de trabajo. Quiero darle la bienvenida a Marike de Peña. Ella es la vicepresidenta del Consejo de Directores y presidenta de la Red de Banano de la Coordinadora Latinoamericana del Caribe de Pequeños Productores y Trabajadores de Comercio Justo, CLAC, donde ha impulsado la organización de redes regionales, nacionales, de producto y de trabajadores. Con más de 35 años de trayectoria con pequeños productores en República Dominicana y otros países de la región, ha sido testigo de los retos que enfrentan, desde precios bajos y prácticas comerciales desleales hasta el cambio climático, pero también de su fuerza y la capacidad de esos productores para responder a esos desafíos. Muchas gracias, Marike, por estar con nosotros y te dejo la pantalla.
Sí, muchísimas gracias, Valeria. Y no es fácil ser la última y pues agregar más a lo que ya hemos hablado, ¿verdad? Pero el tema definitivamente es muy importante. La trabajamos en muchos continentes y pues desde Latinoamérica la trabajamos como CLAC. Pues seguimos de una vez con la otra. Pues hablamos mucho de la equidad de género y pues es un derecho, pero sabemos que en el mundo laboral es un derecho que no siempre alcanzamos, ¿verdad? Y hay varias razones por la cual no lo alcanzamos. Uno es la misma sobrecarga que tenemos las mujeres, que tenemos mucha responsabilidad hacia el hogar y la misma responsabilidad nos permite los limita en asumir más tareas y más trabajo. Pero también y sobre todo en el sector agrícola, los trabajos son diseñados a estereotipos, ¿no? ¿Qué trabajo puede hacer la mujer? ¿Qué trabajo puede hacer el hombre? Y eso pone muchos límites a lo que los trabajos, lo que pueden asumir las mujeres. Hay muy pocas mujeres, sobre todo en el sector bananero, en puestos gerenciales. Y pues sí, sí, entre el público hay muchas mujeres. Sabemos que cuando tenemos mujeres en puestos gerenciales, nosotros tendemos a reclutar mujeres. Pero si la mayoría de puestos gerenciales están ocupados por hombres, pues no es la misma dinámica, ¿verdad? Y por otro, el respeto a nuestros derechos, las mujeres seguimos sufriendo de violencia basada en género en los lugares de trabajo y el acoso sexual. Seguimos. El valor de la debida diligencia, porque verdaderamente la debida diligencia es una oportunidad. Es una oportunidad de analizar en diferentes niveles, diferentes retos que tenemos, pero también es oportunidad que hombres y mujeres van analizando su contexto laboral y se genera más conciencia sobre qué son los derechos y qué significa la equidad de género. Entender si realmente estos derechos son respetados y si alcanzamos la equidad. Pero también de si no respetamos los derechos, y muchas veces no es el caso, no limitado a lo que es el derecho de género, ¿verdad? También otros derechos desarrollar políticos y planes que nos permiten alcanzar los derechos y mejorar en el tiempo. Entonces, la debida diligencia es un proceso, nos permite reflexionar, permite un análisis entre diferentes tipos de trabajadores, productores, gerencias, mujeres, hombres, genera mucho más conciencia sobre la realidad en que vivimos y en la realidad en que queremos vivir, ¿verdad? La siguiente. Pues en todos estos análisis del contexto en que vivimos y el contexto que quisiéramos vivir, nos enfrentamos con el tema del acoso y la violencia basada en género. em, y hemos tratado de entender por qué se existe y qué barreras existen para que no podemos o no logramos buscar soluciones efectivas, ¿verdad? Porque la violencia de género no es algo nuevo, ni el acoso tampoco, y nosotros que trabajamos en el campo de rastrería, terminamos siendo muy frustrados de hablar del tema y no encontrar soluciones efectivas para realmente responder a esta situación, que es una situación que afecta a miles y miles de mujeres en el mundo, ¿verdad? Entonces, una de las barreras que entendemos que realmente hay una escasa sensibilización sobre el tema, y también hay temas culturales que de una manera u otra no destaca tanto esto no se puede permitir si queremos lugares de trabajo decente y deberíamos promover mucho más la no tolerancia. También es un tema pues que las mismas mujeres no nos gusta hablar mucho de esto por desconfianza y temor que cualquier denuncia puede resultar en represalias y muchos de nosotros necesitamos el trabajo para ganar dinero y llevarle al hogar, ¿verdad? Hay mucho desconocimiento entre las mujeres que cuáles son los medios que pueden usar para denunciar y cuáles son las políticas que existen en los países para hacer denuncia. Los comités de género que hemos instalado en muchas plantaciones y organizaciones de pequeños productores no siempre son funcionales y sobre todo lo que hemos visto en tiempos de conflicto, en tiempos de crisis como en el COVID, pero también en zonas donde hay mayor inseguridad y que las autoridades no están o no logran funcionar. Óptimamente la violencia crezca, ¿no? Las mismas sanciones que podremos hacer nosotros a nivel de plantación o a nivel de organización y lo que deberían hacer las autoridades no siempre son efectivos. Y pues por la misma complejidad y el hecho que las mujeres no hablamos sobre lo que está pasando en esa realidad, no hacemos más visible que es hora de actuar. La siguiente, por favor. Pues, ¿qué hemos hecho? ¿Qué hemos logrado y qué nos falta? Porque todos los que hemos hablado en esta sesión hemos actuado y todos tenemos muy buenos aprendizajes, pero también sabemos que nos falta alcanzar la meta, ¿no? Pues definitivamente estamos capacitando mucho en el tema de la debida diligencia, que no es más que un autoanálisis de que en nuestro entorno de trabajo si estamos respetando o no los derechos tanto del hombre como la mujer y si hay brechas en ese respeto, desarrollar los planes de acción. También estamos haciendo un diagnóstico participativo con mujeres para que las mujeres empiezan a analizar su propia realidad, entender las causas, porque tenemos esta realidad y desarrollar planes para responder a los mismos. Estamos empoderando a las mujeres en temas de prevención y de acoso sexual y violencia de género, y estamos mirando cómo los mecanismos de quejas que tenemos pueden ser más funcionales, sobre todo para estos temas tan delicados. Estamos trabajando en políticas de protección y para eso necesitamos generar capacidades dentro de las empresas y las organizaciones que cuando las mujeres deciden quejarse, existen los mecanismos y la capacidad de apoyar a las mujeres en la gestión, en su denuncia, pero también en la búsqueda de soluciones. Y estamos informando a las mujeres sobre los mecanismos que existen públicas de las instituciones y autoridades de hacer las denuncias, pero también donde ellos pueden buscar apoyo para su situación. Una iniciativa nueva que tenemos es tratar que cada plantación y cada organización abra una oficina dedicada únicamente a la prevención de la violencia basada en género y el acoso. Iniciamos en la República Dominicana. Es una oficina realmente entrenado para recibir estas quejas y responder a estas quejas. La siguiente. Bueno, un poquito sobre nuestra campaña. Cuando hicimos con un equipo de expertos en derechos humanos el análisis, porque vamos a 4 o 5 años capacitando, concientizando, haciendo nuestras acciones de prevención, generando capacidades en los comités de género, generando conciencias en los mandos medios, porque todavía recibimos. Y el análisis que tenemos que la violencia y el acoso se quedan en el silencio. Y por quedar en el silencio, no se habla mucho de ellos ni se actúa mucho sobre ellos. Y lo que queremos es generar una mayor visibilidad, que esto no toleramos si queremos trabajar en espacios de trabajo dignos y seguros. Y de eso se trata esa campaña, es dar más visibilidad a la no tolerancia, generar mayores capacitaciones, un mayor diálogo y una mayor colaboración entre hombres, mujeres, empresas y cadenas de valor. Es una campaña que realmente quisiéramos hacer grande, porque si no empezamos a hablar, si no sacamos este hecho de la oscuridad donde está, donde muchas mujeres son víctimas de violencia y víctimas de acoso, no vamos a cambiar esta realidad. Cada uno de nosotros que operamos en este sector debemos promover el cambio. Pues de eso se trata la campaña. La siguiente. ¿Qué hemos aprendido? Es muy importante que la gerencia o los dueños de plantaciones y la gerencia de organizaciones de pequeños productores promueven realmente la protección y los derechos humanos, o sea, deben creer en estos, deben ser los primeros promotores, porque con esta actitud se abren muchos caminos y se abre el camino al cambio. Eh, Aprendimos también que debemos fortalecer los mecanismos de quejas. Todavía son mecanismos que existen, pero los mismos trabajadores y trabajadoras no siempre hacen uso de los mecanismos. Igual, aunque que existen, no siempre existe la capacidad de responder a las diferentes denuncias que reciben ese tipo de mecanismos. Entonces, es hora de fortalecer estos mecanismos y también crear mecanismos especiales para responder a los riesgos de género. Pues tenemos que romper el silencio y es una invitación para todos nosotros. Rompémoslos y empezamos a trabajar sobre la realidad en que muchas mujeres viven hoy en día. La siguiente. Hay un problema también porque donde hay escasez de mano de obra y sobre todo escasez de puestos laborales para mujeres, eso también contribuye a que a las mujeres mismas deciden mejor no hablar porque no quieren perder su trabajo. Esto es algo que debemos generar más oportunidades para puestos de trabajo para las mujeres. Tenemos que trabajar muy de cerca con los mandos medios. Ellos mismos deben liderar y entender la relevancia de trabajar el tema de la violencia y el acoso. Y por último, tenemos que fortalecer las mujeres, los comités de mujeres, porque son los que deben denunciar, deben manejar las denuncias y romper el silencio. Pues esas son nuestras lecciones. Yo no creo que yo tenía mucho más.
Muchísimas gracias,
Correcto.
Marike. Esa es
Gracias a ustedes.
esa es la última diapositiva que tenemos. Muchísimas gracias por esa presentación. Creo que ha sido bastante complementaria a todo lo que hemos venido viendo. Hemos empezado con la parte general de los estándares internacionales de la OIT, la parte normativa, y luego hemos ido entrando un poco al rol de cada actor en la cadena y nos hemos terminado centrando concretamente en uno de los problemas que se ha mencionado a lo largo de todas las intervenciones, que es la violencia de género y el acoso laboral. Y creo que la experiencia de la campaña que ha lanzado CLAC este año es muy importante porque, sobre todo en estos contextos, en el contexto latinoamericano concretamente, pero creo que se puede extrapolar a otras regiones bananeras, el tema cultural es muy importante para abordar esto y como bien dijo Marike, esta no es excusa para no tratarlo o tratar de alcanzar esta equidad de género y un mundo de trabajo sano, saludable y seguro para todas las mujeres también. Quería darle la palabra a Adela porque tenemos una pregunta que Marike también ha mencionado en su intervención. La pregunta es, se ha hablado mucho de formación y medidas preventivas para evitar el acoso y la discriminación, pero ¿qué medidas se toman para los agresores? Marike ha mencionado ya un poco también la importancia de las sanciones a nivel privado, pero la coordinación necesaria con las autoridades públicas y ahora quisiera darle la palabra también a Adela para que nos dé su punto de vista.
Bueno, Valeria, en cuanto a la pregunta, es bastante complejo, porque nosotros como movimiento sindical, trabajadores, pues podemos llevar todas las quejas, pero afortunadamente hemos encontrado el concurso también de empresas que son conscientes y hacemos los procesos de denuncia. Primero, pues hacemos el proceso ante la empresa para que tomen acciones con esta persona, este agresor, pero también lo hacemos ante el Ministerio de Trabajo. Y resultado de eso, pues muchas empresas han tomado la decisión de separar a esa persona agresora del cargo. Y tenemos casos de este año, específicamente acá en Colombia, de este año, que esas personas han sido retiradas de su cargo, porque han tenido esas agresiones con las mujeres, esas conductas que no son las que queremos para nuestras mujeres en las fincas, y eso es lo que ha pasado. Igual nosotros no podemos, quisiéramos decir, bueno, cuando llega a pasar esto, pues se va de una vez, pero no lo podemos hacer, pero entonces acudimos a los mecanismos legales, primero a la empresa y luego al mecanismo legal ya del Ministerio del Trabajo, que es lo que hacemos para hacer la respectiva, digamos, queja y que hacer el seguimiento a esa situación que nosotros presentamos para que verdaderamente se le dé el trámite que tiene que darse, porque algunas empresas se quedan calladas, de pronto no dicen nada y precisamente por eso fue que conformamos la mesa tripartita con el ministerio y las empresas a través de los departamentos de recursos humanos para estas situaciones que se presentan en muchas de las fincas, porque nos llegan muchas quejas y no solamente en Colombia, sino en los otros países también que tenemos esa problemática. Entonces, es que separa a esa persona del cargo o lo manden para otro lado, pero también decimos, lo mandan para otra finca y tiene que haber un castigo ejemplar, porque lo mandan para la otra, pero entonces allá va a ser lo mismo que hizo con la que estaba en esa finca. Entonces, aquí las empresas tienen que tomar una acción muy concreta, muy radical con sus empleados, sus trabajadores varones, para que estas prácticas no se, o sea, lo que no debe hacer es que no se hagan esas prácticas de acoso sexual, o sea, esa tolerancia cero en ese sentido. Entonces, es como eso, Valeria.
Muchísimas gracias, Adela. Creo que ha sido muy clara la respuesta. Marike, no sé si quisieras complementar con algo
Pero
o...
en la realidad yo creo que hay experiencias buenos y malos. Lamentablemente un poquito más malo que bueno. Pero muchas veces las personas, los agresores son personas con mayor poder que la mujer, ¿no? Y la empresa tiende a defenderlos. Y eso es muy triste. Ahora, puede ser que empecé a decir que es importante que la misma gerencia realmente promueve ese para que tome las acciones cuando encuentra esa realidad en sus espacios laborales. Si la empresa no cree en eso, no promueve eso, no se va a hacer nada. Entonces tenemos los buenas experiencias, sobre todo de empresas muy comprometidas con esa equidad y la no violencia que toman medidas duras. Pues la medida dura es que hay que sacar a la persona. Hasta ponerla en otro lado no es una solución porque va a ser lo mismo. Va a ser lo mismo. Así las sanciones tienen que ser un poquito duro. Ahora, si no hay nada, yo he visto que hasta cancelan a la mujer, le sacan su trabajo. Sí, tenemos de todo y yo creo que el mecanismo de sanciones deben estar claro y no es permitido y las personas que lo hacen pues deberían ser sacados de su trabajo, lamentablemente.
Muchas gracias, Marike. Sí, creo que la pregunta es muy interesante porque quizás nuestro enfoque ha sido bien positivo, ¿no? O enfocado en la prevención, que es un componente definitivamente clave para cambiar las actitudes en el largo plazo, pero también es importante, como han mencionado Marike y Adela, que para que una mujer se atreva a romper el silencio y acceda a estos mecanismos que de por sí la ponen en riesgo, puedan ver que el impacto que tiene eso de hecho la beneficia y que la protege, ¿no? Y que no, después de haberse expuesto a esta situación, que simplemente tenga que volver a trabajar con su agresor al costado. Creo que ambos componentes son muy importantes para avanzar en erradicar este problema a futuro. Ya estamos un poquito pasadas de la hora. Quiero agradecerles a Marike, a Adela y a las panelistas que ya no nos acompañan, pero que nos han brindado posiciones y perspectivas muy interesantes, y a la audiencia por haberse quedado con nosotros hasta ahora. Quisiera mencionar un pequeño comentario que me parece muy interesante para futuros webinarios que organicemos. Nos comentan que este es un espacio donde deberíamos invitar, por ejemplo, a ejecutivos de corporaciones para que nos compartan también las dificultades o los desafíos que tienen ellos desde la perspectiva quizás más empresarial, porque ahora hemos visto muchos de los beneficios que tiene la equidad de género para la empresa también. Creo que ha quedado bastante claro con las distintas iniciativas que nos han compartido, pero también sería interesante contar con gente quizás no de los equipos de sostenibilidad o de derechos humanos, sino también desde el punto de vista empresarial, concretamente qué dificultades se encuentran en el día a día para poner en práctica, por ejemplo, sanciones con relación a acoso laboral. Así que sin más, quisiera nuevamente darles las gracias. Vamos a mantenerlos informados sobre el reporte que colgaremos en la página web del Foro Mundial Bananero. La grabación estará disponible en el canal de YouTube también, por si quieren volver a verla o compartirla con sus redes. Y buscaremos los enlaces que las distintas panelistas han compartido para incluirlas en el reporte y que puedan acceder a ellos. Así que sin más, muchas gracias y hasta el siguiente webinario.